I watched the paralyzed Mafia boss launch himself out of his wheelchair to save my life, his legs coiling like a predator's as he prepared to kill with his bare hands. 6 months of lies shattered in one heartbeat, and now I knew too much. The man I'd been paid triple rate to rehabilitate didn't need fixing. He needed me to keep his most dangerous secret. Hey my beautiful family, before this story begins, I want you to do something real quick. Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from. Your comments fuel these stories. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button because what happens next will leave you speechless. Let's begin. The man in the wheelchair didn't turn around. He remained facing the floor toe-ceiling window that overlooked the sprawling neon-soaked grid of Seoul. From the back he was an imposing silhouette, shoulders too broad for a man who had allegedly spent the last 6 months withering away in a hospital bed. His hair was jet black, cut short and sharp, blending into the shadows of the room. "Another one," he said. His voice was a low baritone, smooth but vibrating with a hostility that made the hair on my arm stand up. It wasn't a question. It was a dismissal. "I'm not another one, Mr. Hang," I said, stepping further into the room, my orthopedic shoes squeaking against the black marble floor. "I'm the one who stays." "They all say that," he replied, finally engaging the joystick on his armrest. The electric motor, a soft, high-pitched whine that cut through the silence as he spun the chair around to face me. My breath hitched. The dossier hadn't done him justice. Hang was devastatingly handsome, with high aristocratic cheekbones and eyes so dark they looked like abysses. But his face was a mask of cold indifference. He looked at me not like a person, but like a smudge of dirt on a pristine window. "You are the 5th therapist this month," he noted, his gaze raking over me. It wasn't sexual. It was clinical. He was dissecting me. The last one left in tears because I threw a vase at his head. The one before that quit because I refused to speak. "Why are you here, Miss Underwood? Do you enjoy abuse or are you just incompetent?" I tightened my grip on my clipboard until my knuckles turned white. I thought about the voicemail on my phone from the collection agency. I thought about the shadowy figures parked outside my apartment in Chicago before I fled here. I thought about the sheer number of zeros on the debt Marcus had left me with when he skipped town. "I'm here because you pay triple the market rate," I said bluntly, deciding instantly that pity wouldn't work on a man like this. "And because I have a reputation for fixing the unfixable. I don't care about your mood swings, Mr. Wong. I care about your physiology." He arched a brow, a flicker of surprise, breaking his stoic mask. "Honest, a rare quality and expensive." "I'm worth it," I countered. "Now, can we dispense with the intimidation tactics? I need to establish a baseline." I didn't wait for his permission. I set my bag down on the glass coffee table and walked toward him. Up close, he smelled potent. The antiseptic scent I'd noticed earlier was losing the battle against his natural scent. Warm skin, clean linen, and that sharp metallic tang of power. I knelt beside the wheelchair. Being this close to him felt dangerous, like stepping inside the radius of a bomb that had stopped ticking but hadn't exploded yet. "I need to check for spasticity and muscle tone," I stated, reaching for his left leg. He didn't move. He didn't help. He just watched me with those unreadable predator eyes. As I lifted his leg, resting his ankle on my thigh, I frowned. I had treated paraplegics for 10 years. I knew what atrophy looked like. I knew how soft and doughy the muscles became after months of disuse. His calf was firm, not rock hard. He was clearly resting, but there was tone there. Structure. The quadriceps felt dense under the expensive fabric of his sweatpants. "You have remarkable muscle retention for a T12 injury," I murmured, pressing my thumbs into the gastrocnemius muscle. "I have excellent genetics," he said flatly. "Genetics don't fight gravity and disuse, Mr. Hang," I said, looking up at him. Our faces were only inches apart now. I could see the faint pores on his skin, the slight flare of his nostrils. "You've been doing electrical stimulation, passive exercise, something like that." I narrowed my eyes. Something was wrong. The texture of the muscle. It wasn't just retained mass. It was responsive. When I pressed deep near the knee, I felt a micro twitch. Not a spasm, a reaction. "I need to test your sensation levels," I said, reaching into my pocket. I pulled out a neurological pinwheel, a small medical tool with sharp rotating spikes used to test nerve endings. He looked at the metal instrument, then back at me. He didn't look afraid. He looked bored. Go ahead, he said. This is sharp, I warned him. If you have any sensation at all, this will hurt. If you are truly paralyzed, you won't feel a thing. I watched his pupils. That was the tell. You could control a flinch. You could control a gasp. But you couldn't control the dilation of your pupils when pain hit the nervous system. I took his hand, large, calloused, shockingly warm, and ran the wheel over his palm first. This is what it feels like. He didn't blink. I know what pain feels like, Miss Underwood. I moved the wheel down to his thigh, just above the knee. I didn't go gentle. I applied pressure enough to prick the skin enough to send a sharp jolt of stay awake to the brain. I ran the spikes across his quadricep. Nothing. His leg didn't jerk. His breathing didn't hitch. His face remained a carved statue of indifference, but I was watching his hands. They were resting on the armrests of the wheelchair. As the spikes dug in, the tendon in his right wrist jumped just once. A tiny microscopic rebellion of the body betraying the mind. My heart hammered against my ribs. He felt that. I knew he felt that. If he could feel pain, he wasn't paralyzed. And if he wasn't paralyzed, why was he sitting in this chair, paying me a fortune to rehabilitate legs that worked perfectly fine? I pushed harder, digging the pinwheel in, looking for the truth. Careful, he murmured, his voice dropping an octave, turning into a low rumble that vibrated through my chest. You'll draw blood. I stopped. I pulled the instrument away and looked up at his face. He was staring right at me, and for a second, the mask slipped. I saw a flash of something dark, something violent and heated swirling in his iris. It was the look of a man who wanted to grab my throat, either to strangle me or pull me closer. I couldn't tell which. He knew that I suspected. The air between us grew heavy, charged with a sudden suffocating tension. The clinical atmosphere vanished, replaced by the raw primal instinct of hunter and prey. He leaned forward slightly, invading my personal space, his cologne flooding my senses. Do your worst, Miss Underwood, he said. His voice cold as ice, but his eyes burning with a terrifying fire. I feel nothing. Well, see about that, I thought, capping the needle with a snap. Well, see about that. The glass doors of the Wong Tower slid shut behind me, sealing in the scent of money and sterile air, spitting me out into the humid exhaust-choked evening of Seoul. I pulled my thin coat tighter around myself. The interview had rattled me more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just the strange coiled tension in Hong Song-kyu's legs. It was the way he looked at me. Like he knew exactly what I was hiding. Like he could smell the desperation sweating out of my pores. I took the subway south away from the glittering skyscrapers of Gangnam and into the tangled narrower streets where the rent was cheap and the streetlights flickered. The train car smelled of wet wool and spicy fermented cabbage. I stared at my reflection in the dark glass of the window. My eyes looked tired. I was 32 years old, a top-tier physical therapist with a master's degree. And I was living like a fugitive because Marcus, my charming lying gambling addict of an ex-husband, had signed my name on loans I didn't know existed until the day he boarded a flight to non-extradition soil. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A heavy singular vibration that made my stomach drop. I pulled it out. Unknown number I shouldn't have answered, but fear makes you do stupid things. It makes you hope that maybe it's good news, even when you know it never is. Hello, Sheniqua Underwood. A voice rasped. It wasn't the American debt collectors from Chicago. The accent was thick local Korean, but the tone was universal. It was the tone of a man holding a sledgehammer. We have bought your paper. My blood turned to ice water. I don't know who you are. I'm making payments. I sent money last week to the Americans. The voice said, they got tired of chasing you across the ocean. They sold your debt to us. We are less patient. We are outside. I stopped walking. I was 2 blocks from my tiny studio apartment. The street was narrow, lined with closed shops and piles of damp cardboard boxes waiting for recycling. The shadows between the buildings seemed to stretch, growing teeth. I don't have it all right now, I whispered, my voice trembling. I just got a job, a high-paying one. I can pay you double next month. Next month is too far, the voice said right as a shadow detached itself from the wall of the convenience store ahead of me. I spun around to run, but 2 men stepped out from the alleyway behind me. They were dressed in cheap leather jackets that creaked as they moved. The smell hit me first, stale cigarette smoke and cheap soju. They didn't look like masterminds. They looked like hunger and violence wrapped in skin. The man in front, the one with the phone still pressed to his ear, smiled. His teeth were stained yellow. "Miss Underwood, the boss wants a down payment. Maybe a kidney. Or maybe we just break the hands that do the work." I backed up until my spine hit the cold brick of the building. My breath came in short, sharp gasps. I was trapped. I calculated the distance to the main road. Too far. I scanned for a weapon. Nothing but trash. "Please," I said, holding my hands up, palms open. "If you hurt me, I can't work. If I can't work, you don't get paid. We don't get paid for patience." The leader sneered, stepping forward. He pulled a baton from his jacket. It clicked as it expanded, a gleaming rod of steel in the dim light. "We get paid for examples." He raised the weapon. I flinched, squeezing my eyes shut, bracing for the crack of bone, the flare of pain. Screech. Tires shrieked against asphalt. A sound so loud it tore through the air like a physical blow. I opened my eyes just as two matte black SUVs roared into the narrow street, mounting the curb and boxing us in. The headlights were blinding, washing the alley in stark white illumination. The doors flew open before the vehicles even came to a complete stop. Men poured out. They weren't wearing cheap leather jackets. They wore immaculate charcoal suits. They didn't move like street thugs. They moved like a hydra, a single organism with multiple heads. The thug leader faltered, the baton wavering in his hand. "Hey, this is Viper Clan business. Back off." The man who stepped out of the lead SUV ignored him. He was tall with a face carved from granite and a jagged scar running through his left eyebrow. He adjusted his cufflinks calmly as he walked toward us. This was Mr. Han. I remembered seeing him in the background at the estate. A silent shadow behind Sang Q's chair. "Viper Clan," Mr. Han said, his voice bored. "Bottom feeders." The thug swung the baton. It was over in 3 seconds. Mr. Han didn't even unclasp his hands. He stepped inside the swing. His movement a blur of efficiency. There was a sickening crunch. The sound of an elbow snapping backward, followed by a guttural scream. The thug leader hit the pavement, clutching a limb that was now bent at a horrific angle. The other two thugs scrambled back, but the other security agents were already there. A swift kick to a kneecap, a chop to the throat. No wasted energy, just brutal efficient neutralization. Silence returned to the alley, broken only by the groans of the men on the ground. Mr. Han turned to me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't offer a handkerchief. He looked at me with the same cold appraisal his boss had used. "Get in the car, Miss Underwood," he said. "I thank you," I stammered, my heart still hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. "But I can't go with you. I need to." "It wasn't a request," Mr. Han interrupted. He opened the back door of the SUV. The interior looked like the inside of a spaceship. Black leather, blue ambient light. "The boss requires your presence." I looked at the groaning men on the ground, then at the open door. I realized then that I hadn't been saved. I had just changed owners. I got in. The ride back to the Wong estate was silent. The windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see the city passing by. I sat in the plush leather seat, my hands shaking in my lap. I tried to compose myself to find the professional mask I wore like armor, but it was cracking. When we arrived, Mr. Han escorted me up a private elevator I hadn't seen before. It bypassed the lobby and opened directly into the penthouse office. The room was vast, dominated by shadows and the glow of the city grid outside. Hang sat behind a massive desk of black obsidian. He wasn't looking at the window this time. He was looking at a tablet. The blue light illuminating the sharp angles of his face, making him look like a vampire king on his throne. "Sit," he commanded, not looking up. I sat in the uncomfortable low-slung chair opposite him. "Mr. Hong, your men, they just handled a pest problem," he finished for me. He finally looked up. His eyes were dark voids, devoid of empathy. "You lied on your intake forms, Sheniqua. You checked no under financial liabilities." I didn't think my personal debts were relevant to my ability to do therapy, I argued, though my voice lacked its usual fire. "Everything is relevant," he said softly. He tapped the tablet and slid it across the obsidian surface toward me. I looked down at the screen. It was a bank transfer receipt. The amount was staggering. It was the full total of Marcus's debt. Every cent. You paid them? I whispered, looking up at him in shock. I bought the debt, he corrected, his voice sharp. I don't pay criminals off, Miss Underwood. I acquire their assets. And currently, the asset attached to this debt is you. He pressed a button on his armrest, and the wheelchair hummed, bringing him around the desk until he was inches from my knees. The scent of sandalwood and danger washed over me again. You have a unique set of skills that I require, he said. But I cannot have my therapist looking over her shoulder every 5 minutes. It makes for poor focus. And I need your absolute, undivided attention. So I owe you the money now? I asked, feeling the walls closing in. I can set up a payment plan, deduct it from my salary. No, he said, I don't want your money. I have enough money to burn this city to the ground and rebuild it in gold. I want your time. He pulled a paper contract from a drawer and placed it next to the tablet. The terms are simple, he said, his voice dropping to that silky, threatening baritone. Condition 1, you live here in the estate. No more commuting to the slums. It's a security risk. I opened my mouth to object, but he cut me off with a raised finger. Condition 2. You are exclusively mine. You take no other clients. You are on call 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When I wake up in pain at 3:00 a.m., you are there to fix it. My chest tightened. And condition 3. Condition 3, he said, his eyes locking onto mine, pinning me to the chair. A non-disclosure agreement. Absolute silence. If you speak a word of what happens in this house about my condition, my business, or my moods to anyone, the debt is reinstated immediately with interest. And I will not be as polite as the men in the alley. I looked at the contract. It was a cage, a gilded, expensive cage, but a cage nonetheless. If I signed this, I belonged to him. If I walked away, the Viper clan would be waiting for me before I even reached the street. I looked at his legs wrapped in the dark fabric of his trousers. The legs, I suspected, could feel every shift in the air pressure. The legs of a liar. I have a choice, don't I? I asked bitterly. We always have choices, Sheniqua, he said, using my first name for the first time. It sounded intimate and possessive on his tongue. But we rarely like them. I picked up the heavy fountain pen. The metal was cold against my sweating fingers. I thought of the baton raised over my head. I thought of Marcus laughing as he boarded his plane. I signed. The ink was black and permanent. Sheniqua watched the nib of the pen trace my name. He didn't smile. He just nodded. A king accepting the fealty of a new subject. Good, he murmured, taking the paper back. He folded it slowly, never breaking eye contact. I own the debt, Miss Underwood, he said, his voice echoing with finality in the silent room. Which means I own your time. The private medical gym in the basement of the Wong estate didn't look like a place of healing. It looked like a torture chamber designed by Apple. Everything was chrome, black leather, and mirrors. The air was filtered so aggressively it felt thin in my lungs, devoid of dust, but heavy with something else. Anticipation. Huang Sheniqua was already there, lying supine on the wide therapy plinth. He was wearing loose gray sweatpants and a tight black compression shirt that clung to his chest, outlining pectorals that were far too defined for a man who supposedly spent his days sitting in a chair. You're late, he said, staring at the ceiling. I'm on time. I corrected, checking my watch as I set my bag down. You're early. Eager to start, he didn't answer. He just closed his eyes, his eyelashes thick and dark against his pale cheeks. He looked like a fallen angel waiting for judgment. I washed my hands at the corner sink, the hot water doing little to warm the sudden chill in my fingers. This wasn't just therapy. This was an interrogation. I knew it and he knew it. The contract I'd signed last night burned in my memory, but the pain test from yesterday burned brighter. He had felt that needle. I was sure of it. I walked over to the plinth. We're going to focus on range of motion today, specifically the hamstrings and hip flexors. If you've been sitting as long as you claim, your ilios muscles will be shortened. If we don't stretch them, your hips will permanently contract. Do what you have to do, he gritted out. I moved to the foot of the table. I took his right ankle in my hands. It was heavy. A dead leg has a specific kind of heaviness, a floppiness, like a bag of sand. But as I lifted his leg, cradling his heel in my palm, it felt connected, controlled. I stepped into the space between his legs, lifting his right leg until I could rest his ankle on my shoulder. It was an intimate position, clinical in theory, but deeply personal in practice. I was standing in the cradle of his hips, his leg resting against my neck, my hands gripping his calf to keep the knee straight. "I'm going to lean in now," I warned him. "Tell me if you feel any pulling in the lower back." I placed my hands on his thigh just above the knee and leaned my body weight forward, forcing his leg into a deep hamstring stretch. The smell of him hit me instantly. It wasn't the sterile hospital smell of the room. It was heat. It was the scent of expensive soap and raw masculine musk radiating off his skin. Under my hands, his quadricep felt like a steel cable pulling tight. "Relax, Mr. Huang," I murmured, pressing down harder. "You're fighting me." "I am not fighting," he strained, his voice tight. "You are," I insisted. "I can feel the resistance. If this leg were paralyzed, the muscle would yield until the tissue tore. But you're holding back. Why is that?" I looked down at his face. His eyes were still closed, but his expression wasn't peaceful. It was a mask of concentration. A bead of sweat trickled from his temple, disappearing into his hairline. His jaw was clenched so hard a small muscle feathered rapidly in his cheek. He wasn't in pain. Or rather, not the kind of pain I was inflicting. He was holding himself back. He was using every ounce of willpower to keep his leg from kicking out, to keep his hips from bucking. "It is involuntary," he lied. The words squeezed out through grit teeth. "Spasms." "Let's see," I whispered. I shifted my stance. I moved his leg further back, pushing the stretch past the point of comfort. I could feel the heat radiating from his thigh through the fabric of his sweatpants. My fingers dug into the muscle, testing, probing. His breathing changed. It wasn't the slow, rhythmic breathing of a patient. It was ragged, shallow. I looked at his hands. They were gripping the edges of the black leather table so hard that his knuckles were white. The leather creaked audibly under the pressure. "Breathe." "Thank you," I said softly, dropping the honorific. "You're holding your breath. That increases the tension." His eyes snapped open. They were black fire. He looked at me looming over him, my hands on his body, his leg trapped against my shoulder, and for a second I saw raw, unfiltered hunger. He didn't look like a patient. He looked like a man who wanted to flip me onto the table and show me exactly how much function he had left. "Just get it over with," he growled. "I'm almost done with this side," I said, keeping my voice cool. "Professional." One more deep stretch. I placed my free hand on his opposite hip, the left one, to pin it down. "Keep this hip on the table. Don't let it rise." I pushed his right leg further, driving my weight into the stretch. It was an aggressive maneuver. And then I felt it under my hand. His left hip, the one that should have been dead weight, flexed. It didn't just spasm. It engaged. The gluteal muscle fired, lifting his pelvis an inch off the table, pushing up against my hand as if to meet my touch. That was impossible for a T12 paraplegic. You can't bridge your hips without core and glute strength. I froze. I held his gaze. "That wasn't a spasm," I said, my voice low. "You lifted your hips. You engaged your core." He froze. The air in the room seemed to vanish. The only sound was the hum of the air filter and the rapid thudding of my own heart. He slowly lowered his hips back to the leather. He didn't blink. The sweat on his forehead was gleaming now. "Reflex arc," he said. His voice was primitive withdrawal reflex. "You pushed too hard." That wasn't withdrawal. I countered, leaning closer until my face was hovering over his. Withdrawal pulls away from pain. "You pushed into me." We stayed like that for a heartbeat, frozen in a stalemate of heavy breathing and accusation. I could feel the tremble in his leg against my shoulder. He was vibrating with tension. "You are the expert," he whispered, and the threat was back in his voice, sharp and deadly. "But I know my body." It was a spasm. He was lying. I knew it. He knew I knew it. But we were playing a game with rules I didn't fully understand yet. I slowly lowered his leg, sliding it off my shoulder and placing it back on the table. I smoothed my hands down his shin, a lingering touch that was more taunt than therapy. "Fine," I said. "We'll call it a spasm for now." I walked around to the other side of the table. Left leg. Same routine. No, he snapped. I stopped. Mr. Hang, we need to remain symmetrical, or I said no. He barked, sitting up. He used his arms to pull himself up, but I saw the way his abs rippled, assisting the movement before he caught himself. He swung his legs off the side of the table with a practiced clumsiness that looked less convincing by the second. He wouldn't look at me. He was staring at the floor, his chest heaving. His hands were shaking slightly where they gripped the edge of the mattress. "The session is over," he said, his voice rough, like he had swallowed gravel. "Leave." "We have 20 minutes left," I argued. "If we stop now, your muscles will cramp." "Get out," he roared. The sound echoed off the chrome walls, violent and sudden. I took a step back, startled by the outburst. He turned his head toward me and his face was flushed, his eyes wild. It wasn't anger, it was desperation. He looked like a man holding back a tidal wave. "Get out, Sheniqua," he said, lower this time, almost a warning. Before I forget that I am supposed to be a gentleman, I grabbed my bag. My heart was racing, a mix of fear and an adrenaline rush I couldn't name. I walked to the door, my shoes clicking loudly on the floor. At the threshold, I paused and looked back. He was still sitting on the edge of the table, head in his hands, breathing hard. He looked powerful, dangerous, and trapped. "Drink plenty of water, Mr. Wong," I said coolly. "I'll see you tomorrow." I let the heavy door click shut behind me, cutting off the sight of him. But even in the hallway, I could still feel the phantom weight of his leg on my shoulder and the heat of his skin burning against my palms. He could walk. I was sure of it, and I was going to make him prove it. The thunderstorm over Seoul wasn't just rain. It was a bombardment. Thunder rattled the tempered glass of the penthouse windows like a giant's fist demanding entry, and the flashes of lightning turned the sprawling city below into a flickering black and white movie. It was too null and sleep was a foreign concept. My mind was too loud replaying the session from 3 days ago. The way Seek's hip had lifted. The heat of his skin. The way he had looked at me with that terrifying mix of hatred and desire. I gave up on the tangled sheets of my guest bed and wandered out into the hallway. The estate was massive and silent. A tomb of marble and shadows. I needed a distraction. I needed a book. The library was situated in the west wing, a cavernous room that smelled of old paper, leather polish, and silence. Floor-tolling bookshelves lined the walls, stretching up 20 feet toward the vaulted ceiling. It was impressive, intimidating, and completely empty, or so I thought. I didn't turn on the main lights. The sporadic flashes of lightning provided enough illumination to navigate. I walked toward the section on history, trailing my fingers along the spines of the books. I wanted something dense, something boring enough to knock me out. I spotted a thick leather-bound volume on the Roman Empire. It was on the 4th shelf up, just out of reach. I grabbed the rolling mahogany ladder attached to the brass rail. It glided smoothly, the wheels silent on the plush Persian rug that covered the center of the room. I stepped onto the first rung, then the second. Crack. Thunder exploded directly overhead, shaking the floorboards beneath the ladder. The sound was so loud I flinched, my hand slipping on the polished wood of the rail. It happened in slow motion. My foot slid off the rung. My center of gravity tipped backward. My fingers scrabbled for purchase on the shelf, but I only managed to knock a heavy vase loose. I was falling. Gravity took hold of my stomach, yanking me backward into the void. And then the sky split open. A massive fork of lightning struck a skyscraper nearby, flooding the library with a blinding strobe light intensity. The room went from pitch black to stark, brilliant white for a single frozen second. In that flash, I saw him. Hang Q was sitting in the corner of the room, deep in the shadows of a wingback chair, his wheelchair parked beside him. I hadn't seen him when I entered, but he wasn't sitting anymore. In the strobe light clarity of the lightning, I saw him launching himself forward. His hands were off the armrests, fingers curled into claws. His torso was pitched forward at a 45 degrees angle. His hips were engaged, lifted completely off the seat. His knees were bent, loaded like springs exploding into action. He wasn't dragging himself. He was lunging. He was driving through his heels, his quadriceps bulging under his trousers as he reached out with both arms to catch me. He looked like a linebacker diving for a tackle. He looked powerful. He looked mobile. Then the darkness snapped back into place. I hit the floor. I landed hard on my side. The thick Persian rug absorbing the worst of the impact, but the air still rushed out of my lungs with a painful whoosh. The vase I had knocked over shattered a few feet away, the sound of breaking porcelain echoing like a gunshot in the silence. I lay there for a moment, gasping, staring up at the ceiling, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I scrambled up onto my elbows, whipping my head toward the corner. "You." I wheezed. Another flash of lightning illuminated the room. Huang Shanqiu was sitting in his wheelchair, perfectly still. His hands were resting casually in his lap. His legs were draped motionless against the footrests. He looked as if he hadn't moved in hours, but his chest was heaving. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the throb in my hip. I pointed a shaking finger at him. "You stood up," I accused, my voice trembling with shock. "I saw you." "You lunged." He stared at me, his face a mask of absolute terrifying calm in the flickering light. "You fell, Miss Underwood. You hit your head." I did not hit my head. I shouted, the adrenaline flooding my system. The lightning flashed. "You were out of the chair. You were coming to catch me." He rolled forward, the electric war of the motor the only sound in the room. He stopped a few feet from me, looking down at the shattered vase, then up at my face. "Think about what you were saying," he said, his voice low and reasonable. "Too reasonable. I am paralyzed from the waist down. I have been for 6 months. Even if I wanted to catch you, my legs would not support me." "I know what I saw," I insisted, stepping closer to him. "Your hips were up. Your quads were flexed. You were standing Sang-Q." He looked at me with eyes that were cold, dark pools. He didn't look guilty. He looked disappointed. "Fear plays tricks on the mind," he said softly. "The lightning, the fall. You hallucinated a savior because you were afraid of the impact." "Don't gaslight me," I hissed. "I'm a physical therapist. I know body mechanics. I know the difference between a spasm and a controlled lunge." "You stood up." He sighed, a sound of weary patience. He reached out, his hand hovering near my arm as if to comfort me, but he didn't make contact. "Sheniqua," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that cut through the thunder outside. "Look at me." I looked. I looked for the lie. I looked for the crack in the mask. He leaned forward, his expression softening into something that looked almost like pain. "If I could walk," he said, holding my gaze with intense, unwavering focus. "Do you think I would have let you fall?" The question hung in the air between us, heavy and suffocating. It was a perfect defense. It was designed to disarm me, to make me doubt my senses by appealing to his chivalry, to the sexual tension that had been simmering between us for days. He was asking me to believe that his indifference to my safety was proof of his disability. If he could walk, he would have saved me. He didn't save me. Therefore, he can't walk. Logic. Cold, manipulative logic. But I wasn't looking at his logic. I was looking at his shirt. He was wearing a black silk sleeping shirt. And right in the center of his chest, a single drop of sweat rolled down his sternum. He hadn't moved. He was perfectly relaxed. Then why was his heart rate visible in the pulse of his neck? Why was he sweating in a cold library? He had moved. He had started to rush to me, realized he couldn't reach me in time without blowing his cover, and had forced himself back into the chair in the split second of darkness. He had chosen the lie over my safety. He had calculated the distance, realized he might not catch me, and decided that maintaining his cover was more important than trying. He didn't let me fall because he couldn't walk. He let me fall because his secret was worth more than my bones. The realization didn't make me doubt myself. It made me furious. I straightened my spine, smoothing down my pajamas. I looked at him. Really looked at him, seeing the predator hiding behind the "I didn't hit my head," I said, my voice cold and steady. "And I don't hallucinate." I stepped over the shattered porcelain. "Good night, Mr. Wang." I walked out of the library without looking back. But as I reached the door, another flash of lightning cast his shadow against the far wall. It was the shadow of a king on a throne. A king who would watch the world burn and me with it. Just to keep his crown. We'll see about that, I thought, the anger burning hotter than the fear. We'll see who breaks first. The indoor pool at the Huang estate was a glass cage of tropical humidity. The air was thick and heavy, smelling of chlorine and oversized orchids that dripped condensation onto the limestone deck. Outside, the Seoul skyline was gray and rainy. But inside, it was a suffocating 85 degrees. I adjusted the straps of my black Speedo one last time. It wasn't a fashion statement. It was a piece of athletic equipment, high-necked, racerback, functional. Yet, when I walked out of the changing room, I felt naked. Hang was waiting by the edge of the water in his wheelchair. He had discarded his shirt. I froze for a second. It was the first time I had seen his torso fully exposed. He was magnificent in a terrifying ruined way. His chest was broad, muscles carved from marble, but the landscape of his skin told a violent story. A jagged, puckered scar twisted just below his rib cage, the entry wound. Another nasty star-shaped scar marked his lower back where the bullet had exited near the spine. He had been shot. There was no faking that the trauma was real. The question was whether the recovery was real too. "You are staring," he said, his voice echoing off the glass walls. He didn't sound arrogant today. He sounded defensive. "I'm assessing the scar tissue." I lied, stepping closer. "Hydrotherapy is standard for spinal injuries," sang Q. "The water removes gravity. It allows us to isolate muscle groups without the weight of the body fighting us." "It is unnecessary," he muttered, looking away from me, his gaze fixing on the rippling blue water. "It's necessary," I corrected. "Especially since you refused to do the mad exercises yesterday. Because you were afraid you'd lunge at me again," I added silently. I walked to the hydraulic lift chair at the pool's edge. "I'll help you transfer." He hated this. I could see it in the tightness of his jaw. For a man who ruled a criminal empire or a tech conglomerate, as the paper said, being strapped into a mechanical chair and lowered into water like a piece of cargo was a humiliation. I strapped him in, my hands brushing his bare shoulders. His skin was burning hot. "Lowering," I announced, pressing the button. The machinery hummed, and he descended into the steam. I dove in next to him, the warm water swallowing me up to my chest. I unbuckled the straps and floated him out into the center of the deep end. "I have you," I said, moving behind him. "Lean back against me." This was the trap. In the water, a paralyzed body behaves like a dead weight. Without core engagement, the legs sink, the torso rolls. A paraplegic patient requires constant active stabilization from a therapist to stay upright. I wrapped my arms around his waist, pulling his back against my chest. "Relax," I whispered near his ear. "Let the water take your weight." He was stiff as a board. I said, "Relax, Song Q. If you fight the water, you'll sink." He slowly let his head tip back onto my shoulder. His wet hair brushed against my cheek. The water lapped around us, creating a seal of intimacy that felt dangerous. I could feel the thudding of his heart against his spine, a heavy, rapid rhythm that vibrated through my own ribs. We drifted in the silence for a moment. "I'm going to let go of your right side," I murmured. "I want to see how your body lifts." I slowly peeled my right arm away from his waist. He should have rolled. Gravity and buoyancy should have conspired to twist his torso to the right. He didn't move. He stayed perfectly vertical in the water. I felt it against my stomach. The subtle iron-hard contraction of his abdominal muscles. His obliques were firing, locking his torso in place to compensate for the shift in support. He was balancing himself. "You have incredible core stability for a man with no sensation below the waist," I whispered, sliding my hand down his stomach underwater. My fingers traced the ridges of his abdominals. He sucked in a sharp breath. "I told you I exercise. You can't exercise what you can't feel." I countered my hand, moving lower dangerously close to the waistband of his swim trunks. "This is a righting reflex," sang Q. "Your brain senses the imbalance and corrects it automatically." He spun in my arms. It was a violent fluid motion. He twisted his body using the water's resistance to turn and face me. Suddenly, I wasn't holding him from behind. We were chest to chest, treading water in the middle of the pool. His hands came up to grip my shoulders, supposedly to steady himself, but his grip was bruising. The water sloshed around us, waves colliding. "Stop analyzing me," he growled. His face was inches from mine, wet and furious. Water droplets clung to his eyelashes. "Then stop lying to me," I shot back, looking up into his dark eyes. I know you can feel my hands. I know you can feel the water. Why are you keeping this up? You know nothing, he whispered. The air between us shifted. The anger didn't dissipate. It transmuted. It turned into something heavier, hotter. He was looking at my mouth. His gaze dropped to my lips, then back to my eyes. The pupils were blown wide, swallowing the iris. The heat coming off his body was overwhelming, warming the water between us. My breath hitched. My legs were tangling with his underwater, his useless legs that felt strong and heavy against mine. Tell me you don't feel this, I dared him, my voice trembling. Tell me you don't feel the heat. He didn't answer. He leaned in, his hand slid from my shoulder to the back of my neck, his thumb pressing into the soft spot behind my ear. It was a possessive touch, a claim. I tilted my head back, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against his bare chest. I wanted him to kiss me. God help me. I wanted the liar to kiss me. He lowered his head, his lips hovering a breath away from mine. I could taste his exhale. Mint and despair. Sheniqua, he groaned, the sound vibrating in his throat. Then he froze. A flicker of panic crossed his face. Realization dawned in his eyes. He realized where he was. He realized that if he kissed me, he wouldn't stop. He realized that if he took what he wanted, he would wrap his legs around me. He would stand up and press me against the tiled wall, and his secret, the secret he was using to hunt the men who tried to kill him, would be gone. He violently shoved me away. No. The force of his push sent me backward, water splashing into my face. I gasped, coughing as I treaded water to regain my balance. Sheniqua was thrashing toward the edge of the pool, using his arms to drag himself through the water with a frantic, chaotic energy that looked less like swimming and more like fleeing. Get me out, he roared, his voice cracking. He reached the wall and gripped the metal ladder, his knuckles white. Get the chair. Get me out of here, Sonk. Wait now. He screamed, not looking at me. He was staring at the tiles, his chest heaving, his body shaking with suppressed tremors. I swam to the controls, my own heart breaking in my chest. I activated the lift. I watched him drag himself into the chair, shivering not from cold, but from the effort of containment. He refused to look at me as the machine hoisted him out of the water. He sat there dripping wet, wrapped in a towel like a shroud, staring at the floor with a look of utter self-loathing. He had won the battle. He hadn't kissed me. He hadn't stood up. But as I watched him wheel himself out of the steam-filled room without a backward glance, I knew the war was far from over. He was cracking. And next time, the water wouldn't be there to cool us down. The silence between us was heavier than the humid air of the greenhouse. It had been 24 hours since the incident in the pool, since the almost kiss, the panic, the way he had looked at me with raw, terrified hunger before banishing me from the room. Now the sun was shining with mocking brightness. I was pushing Sheniqua through the estate's labyrinth and gardens, a sprawling maze of high hedges, white marble statues, and gravel paths that crunched loudly under my shoes. Turn left here, he murmured. It was the first thing he had said to me in 20 minutes. That leads to the dead end, I replied, my voice tight. The koi pond. I know, he said. I want to see the water. I gripped the rubber handles of the wheelchair tighter. He was punishing himself. Or maybe he was punishing me, forcing us back to the element where he had almost lost control. The garden was beautiful, smelling of blooming jasmine and freshly cut grass. A gardener in a beige uniform and a wide-brimmed hat was trimming a hedge about 50 yards away. The rhythmic snip 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 of the shears, the only sound breaking the awkward quiet. Sheniqua. About yesterday, I started needing to break the tension. We need to talk about the thip. The sound was soft, like a dry twig snapping. An inch from my right ear, the head of a marble cherub exploded. Stone shrapnel sprayed against my cheek, stinging like angry hornets. I froze, my brain struggling to process the physics of the statue disintegrating down. The command didn't come from a paralyzed man. It came from a general. Sheniqua didn't wait for me to react. He slammed his hand onto the joystick, spinning the heavy electric wheelchair in a violent reverse arc. The metal footrest clipped my shin, sweeping my legs out from under me. I fell hard onto the white gravel, the breath knocked out of me. Stay down, he roared, positioning the wheelchair between me and the long stretch of the path. I looked up, coughing in the dust. The gardener with the shears wasn't trimming hedges anymore. He had dropped the tool and pulled a silenced pistol from his waistband. He was walking toward us, calm, methodical, his face hidden beneath the brim of his hat. "An assassin," I gasped. "Move, Sheniqua." Sank barked. "Behind the fountain." "Go." I scrambled on my hands and knees, the gravel tearing at my palms. I threw myself behind the tiered stone fountain just as another bullet chipped the granite rim above my head. Ping. Ping. The assassin was closing the distance. He wasn't rushing. He knew he had us. And a woman trapped in a cul-de-sac. "Mr. Huang." The assassin called out, his voice light, almost playful. "The chairman sends his regards." Seek didn't cower. He sat exposed in the middle of the path, a sitting duck, but his hand was hovering over the speed controls of his chair. "Come closer," Seek taunted, his voice dropping to that lethal baritone. "If you want the kill, come take it." The assassin raised the gun, aiming for Sonk's chest. Seek slammed the joystick forward. The wheelchair was a 300-pound beast of battery and steel. It surged forward with surprising torque. Seek didn't aim for the man. He aimed for the man's knees. The assassin fired, but the sudden movement threw his aim off. The bullet sparked off the metal frame of the chair. Crunch. The footplate of the wheelchair collided with the assassin's shins. The man howled, buckling forward, but he didn't fall. He rolled over the side of the chair, recovering with terrifying agility. He lashed out, kicking the control box on the armrest. Plastic shattered. The chair sparked and died. Sangu was dead in the water. "Sheniqua." Seek screamed, turning his head to look at me. "The shears. Use the shears." I looked to my left. The head shears the man had dropped were lying in the grass a few feet away. I didn't think. I moved. I lunged from behind the fountain, grabbing the heavy wooden handles. The blades were long, rusted, and wicked. The assassin was raising the gun to Sonk's head. "Hey!" I screamed, swinging the shears like a baseball bat. The man spun around. The heavy blades connected with his forearm. There was a sickening crack of bone and the gun flew from his hand, skittering across the gravel. He roared in pain, but he didn't stop. He was a professional. He ignored the broken arm and lunged at me with his good hand, grabbing me by the throat. He was strong, impossibly strong. He lifted me off my feet, slamming me back against the rough bark of a cedar tree. My vision swam. Black spots danced in my eyes. I clawed at his hand, but it was like prying at a steel vise. "Stupid," he hissed, reaching into his boot with his broken hand. He pulled out a combat knife. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. I looked past the assassin's shoulder at Sang-Q. He was watching me die. His face was contorted in a mask of pure, unadulterated rage. He gripped the armrests of his dead wheelchair. His knuckles were white. And then I saw it. The veins in his neck bulged. His shoulders rolled forward. His legs, his dead legs, planted firmly on the gravel. The muscles in his thighs bunched, ripping against the fabric of his trousers. He was going to stand. He knew it. I knew it. He was going to reveal 6 months of lies. He was going to destroy his master plan. He was going to burn his entire empire to the ground to save me. He started to rise. His hips left the seat. His eyes were locked on the assassin's throat, measuring the distance for the kill. "Seek." "No." I tried to wheeze, but no sound came out. The assassin raised the knife. Seek launched himself. Crack. The sound wasn't a silenced hiss. It was the thunderous boom of a high-caliber sniper rifle. The assassin's head snapped back violently. A red mist sprayed into the air, painting the white gravel crimson. The grip on my throat vanished. The man crumpled to the ground like a puppet with cut strings dead before he hit the earth. I slid down the tree trunk, gasping for air, clutching my bruised neck. I looked at Sang-Q. He had frozen mid-motion. He was hovering inches above his seat, his legs clearly supporting his weight, his hands poised to tear the man apart. As the body hit the ground, Sang-Q collapsed back into the chair. He slumped forward, burying his face in his hands, his chest heaving with adrenaline and horror. "Clear," a voice shouted from the balcony of the estate, 300 yards away. I looked up to see Mr. Han lowering a long-range rifle. Security teams were already sprinting across the lawn toward us. I couldn't stop shaking. The adrenaline crash hit me like a physical blow. I tried to stand, but my knees were water. I stumbled forward. Sangu looked up. His eyes were wild, frantic. He saw me swaying. Sheniqua. He choked out. He reached out and grabbed my wrist, pulling me toward him. He didn't wait for me to sit. He yanked me down into his lap. I collapsed against his chest, burying my face in his neck. I was sobbing now, the terror finally catching up to me. His arms wrapped around me, crushing me against him. One hand tangled in my hair, pressing my head to his shoulder, the other locked around my waist like an iron band. "I have you," he whispered into my hair, his voice ragged. "I have you. You're safe. Look at me. You're safe." I clung to him, listening to the jackhammer rhythm of his heart. But as the security team swarmed around us, shouting orders and securing the perimeter, my mind fixated on one sensation. I was sitting on his thighs and underneath my legs. His quadriceps were rock hard. They were trembling, not with spasms, but with the aftershocks of immense physical exertion. They were the legs of a man who had just prepared to spring into combat. He pressed his forehead against mine, ignoring his men, ignoring the dead body 3 feet away. He whispered, his voice so low only I could hear. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. He had almost stood up. He had almost chosen me over everything. And now, terrified and bruised in the middle of a blood-soaked garden, I knew 2 things for certain. Hang Sanank was a liar and he was in love with me. The lock of the master bedroom door clicked shut with a heavy final sound. It was the loudest noise in the world. Hang Q jerked his head up. He was sitting on the edge of his massive king-sized bed, halfway through the process of transferring from the mattress to his wheelchair. He was shirtless, his skin pale in the moonlight spilling through the balcony doors, the jagged scars on his torso looking like black ink on parchment. He looked exhausted. The adrenaline of the afternoon had faded, leaving him hollowed out, eyes shadowed with fatigue. "Sheniqua," he rasped, his hand freezing on the armrest of the chair. "I told you I need to rest. Get out." "No," I said. My voice was steady, but my hands were shaking. I could still feel the phantom pressure of the assassin's fingers on my throat. The bruise there throbbing in time with my heartbeat, but stronger than the fear was the memory of his legs beneath mine. The rock-hard, twitching muscle of a predator preparing to launch. I walked further into the room. The carpet was thick, swallowing the sound of my footsteps. "What are you doing?" he asked, his eyes narrowing as I approached. I didn't answer. I walked right past him to the wheelchair. He watched me, confused. "Miss Underwood." I grabbed the handles of the chair. And then, with a violent shove, I sent it rolling across the room. It spun silently on its wheels, coming to a stop against the far wall 15 feet away. Sank stared at the chair, then looked back at me. His face went deadly still. "Fetch it," he said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Now no," I repeated. I stepped into the space between his knees. "If you want it, walk and get it." "You are playing a dangerous game," he warned, his hands gripping the edge of the mattress until the sheets twisted in his fists. "I am a Sheniqua. If I fall trying to reach that chair, my blood is on your hands." "Stop it," I shouted, the anger finally boiling over. "The assassin is dead. Sang Q. You don't have to pretend for me. Not anymore. I don't know what you are talking about. I sat on your lap." I yelled, stepping closer until my knees brushed against his. "I felt your quads fire. I felt your glutes engage. I felt you prepare to stand up and kill that man with your bare hands. Do not lie to me." He didn't flinch. He just looked up at me with those bottomless void-like eyes. "Muscle spasms. Trauma response. You are projecting." "Am I?" I moved. Then I didn't think about the consequences. I didn't think about the contract. I thought about the heat in the pool. The look in his eyes when I fell in the library. The desperate way he had held me in the garden. I stepped forward and straddled his legs. He drew a sharp breath. His hands coming up to grip my waist, instinctively steadying me. His touch was burning hot. I settled my weight down on his thighs. They didn't yield. They didn't feel like atrophy and dead nerves. They felt like iron wrapped in silk. I grabbed his face between my hands, forcing him to look at me. "Tell me you don't feel this," I whispered, tracing his lower lip with my thumb. "Tell me your legs are dead." "Sheniqua, stop," he groaned, closing his eyes. It wasn't a command. It was a plea. He was fighting himself. "I won't stop." I kissed him. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was an accusation. I crushed my mouth against his, biting at his lower lip, pouring all my fear and frustration and desire into the contact. I ground my hips down against his thighs. A deliberate, provocative movement that demanded a response. He remained rigid for a second, a statue of discipline. But then I felt it. A tremor ran through his entire body, his grip on my waist tightened, his fingers digging into my skin, bruising me. He kissed me back, a savage, starving sound escaping his throat. I pulled back just an inch, our breaths mingling in the charged air. "I felt you," I whispered against his wet lips. "In the garden, you were going to stand. You were going to save me." He opened his eyes. The black void was gone. In its place was fire. "Yes," he hissed. And then the world tilted. He didn't push me away. He didn't call for help. He stood up. It happened with terrifying ease. One moment I was looking down at him. The next I was rising into the air as he uncoiled. He didn't use his hands to push off the bed. He just rose. The power in his legs was immense, lifting his weight and mine without a shudder of effort. I gasped, wrapping my legs around his waist instinctively as he stood to his full height. He was massive. In the wheelchair, he was imposing. Standing, he was a titan. He was well over 6 feet tall, looming over me, radiating a terrifying dominant energy that filled the room. He walked. He didn't stumble. He didn't limp. He walked across the room with the predatory grace of a panther, carrying me as if I weighed nothing. He slammed me back against the wall next to the balcony door, the impact knocking the breath out of me. "Is this what you wanted?" he growled, pinning my wrists above my head with one hand. His other hand gripped my hip, holding me in place against the wall. I looked down. He was standing on his own 2 feet, legs spread in a wide, powerful stance. He was fully healed. He had been healed for a long time. You can walk," I stammered, the reality of it hitting me harder than the fantasy. "You lied. For months. You let me wash you, carry you, pity you." "I did what was necessary," he roared, leaning in until his nose brushed mine. "Do you think I enjoyed it? Do you think I enjoyed sitting in that chair while my enemies circled like vultures? While you touched me and I couldn't do a damn thing about it? Why?" I demanded, tears pricking my eyes. "Why keep the act up with me? I'm your therapist. I signed the ENDA. You could have told me." He let go of my wrists and stepped back, letting me slide down the wall until my feet hit the floor. He paced away from me, running a hand through his hair. The movement was fluid, aggressive. He moved like a man who had been caged for too long and was finally stretching his limbs. "The men who shot me are still watching," he said, turning back to face me. "They are inside my company. They are inside my house. They think I am weak. As long as they think I am broken, they will get careless. They will step out of the shadows to finish the job." "So I was just a prop?" I asked, my voice trembling. "A distraction?" He stopped pacing. He looked at me and his expression was cold, calculating. The lover was gone. The Mafia boss was back. "I didn't hire you to fix me, Sheniqua," he said ruthlessly. "Then why?" "Because I needed a witness," he said. "I needed a top-tier American specialist with a spotless reputation to sign her name on the medical reports. I needed someone unimpeachable to tell the board, the investors, and my enemies that Hong Sang-Q was permanently paralyzed." He stepped closer, towering over me again. "I used you," he confessed, the words cutting deeper than any knife. "I bought your debt so I could own your credibility. Your diagnosis was my shield. Your pity was my camouflage." I stared at him, feeling the blood drain from my face. The betrayal tasted like ash in my mouth. I wasn't his partner. I wasn't his lover. I was his alibi. "You monster," I whispered. "I am not a monster," he said, reaching out to touch my cheek. I flinched away, but he caught my chin, forcing me to look at him. "I am a king at war. And I will burn the world to win." He leaned down, his voice dropping to a dark, possessive purr. "But you were right about one thing, Miss Underwood. I was going to stand in the garden. I was going to blow 6 months of planning to save your life. He brushed his thumb over the bruise on my neck. Which means, he murmured, that you are now the biggest weakness I have. The morning light filtered into the guest suite, gray and lifeless. It matched the hollow feeling in my chest. I zipped my suitcase shut with a harsh tearing sound that echoed in the silence. It was the same suitcase I had arrived with 3 weeks ago. It was the same suitcase I had packed when I fled Chicago, running from the debts Marcus had left me. History wasn't just repeating itself. It was laughing at me. I had been a prop, a shield, a credible face to hide a monster's secrets. Wang Sanangu hadn't looked at me and seen a woman. He had seen a convenient alibi. I grabbed the handle of the bag and turned toward the door. He was standing there. My breath hitched. Even after last night, seeing him vertical was a shock to the system. He filled the doorway, leaning against the frame with a casual predatory grace that made the wheelchair in the corner look like a discarded toy. He was wearing a dark suit, perfectly tailored to his powerful frame. No more sweatpants, no more blankets, just the King of Soul, fully armored. "Move," I said, my voice flat. "You aren't leaving," he stated. It wasn't a question. It was a fact delivered with the absolute authority of a man who commanded armies. "Watch me," I countered, stepping forward. He didn't budge. He just crossed his arms over his chest, blocking my path completely. "Sheniqua, be rational. The assassin yesterday was just the first wave. My enemies know something is wrong. If you leave this estate, you are a target. You are the only person outside of my inner circle who knows the truth." "The truth?" I laughed, a bitter, sharp sound. "You don't get to talk about the truth. You spent weeks looking me in the eye, letting me work on your body, letting me worry about you, all while you were laughing behind my back." "I never laughed," he said, his voice dropping intense and low. He took a step toward me, invading my space. The heat radiating off him was familiar, but now it was threatening. "I admired you. I desired you. None of that was a lie. The foundation was a lie." I shouted, slamming my hand against his chest. "You used me, Sank. Just like my ex-husband. You needed a woman to clean up your mess, to make you look presentable to the world. I am done being a pawn in men's games." I tried to push past him, but he caught my arm. His grip was gentle, but inescapable. "I can't let you go," he said. And for the first time, I heard a crack in his composure. "It isn't safe out there. I cannot protect you." "I'm not safe in here," I whispered, looking up into his dark, tortured eyes. "You are the danger, Sank. You are the one who brought violence to my doorstep. You are the one who lied to me every single day." He looked at me, his jaw working as he fought to find the words. "I did what I had to do to survive, to reclaim my empire. And you sacrificed my dignity to do it," I said, shaking his hand off my arm. I stood tall, matching his gaze. "So here is your choice, Mr. Huang. You can pull out that gun I know you have in your jacket and shoot me, or you can lock me in the dungeon. But if you keep me here against my will, you aren't a protector. You aren't a lover. You're just a jailer." The word hung in the air between us. Jailer. He flinched as if I had slapped him. He looked at the suitcase in my hand, then back at my face. He saw the resolve in my eyes. He realized that he could keep my body here. But if he forced me to stay, he would lose me completely. He would become exactly what I accused him of being, a monster. Slowly, painfully, he stepped aside. He moved out of the doorway, clearing the path. "I will have Mr. Han follow you," he said, his voice devoid of emotion, turning his face away so I couldn't see his eyes. "From a distance, to ensure you reach the airport." "Don't bother," I said, walking past him. "I don't want your protection. I just want my life back." I walked down the hallway, the wheels of my suitcase rumbling on the marble. I didn't look back. If I had looked back, I might have seen the most powerful man in Seoul looking like he had just lost the only war that mattered. The air outside the estate gates was humid and smelled of ozone. I hailed a cab on the main road, ignoring the black SUV that idled at the gate, Mr. Han, watching me leave. A yellow taxi pulled over. I threw my bag in the trunk and slid into the back seat. "Inan International Airport," I told the driver, my voice trembling. "Yes, ma'am." The driver nodded. He was wearing a black cap and a surgical mask, standard for Seoul traffic. I leaned my head against the cool glass of the window as the car merged into traffic. I watched the Wong Tower disappear into the distance. I should have felt relieved. I was free. The debt was paid. The lie was over, but I didn't feel free. I felt gutted. I closed my eyes, letting a few hot tears leak out. I loved him. God help me. Even after everything, I loved the way he looked at me. I missed him already. The car swerved slightly. I opened my eyes. We weren't on the highway to Incheon. We were exiting into an industrial district, a maze of warehouses and shipping containers. "Excuse me," I said, leaning forward. "You missed the exit. The airport is the other way." The driver didn't answer. He just accelerated. "Sir," I shouted. "Stop the car." I grabbed the door handle. It was locked. I pulled the lock tab up, but it snapped back down instantly. Child lock. Master control. "Sit back, Miss Underwood," the driver said. His voice was different now. Deeper cold. He reached up and peeled off the surgical mask. In the rearview mirror, I saw a face scarred by burns, smiling with cruel amusement. This wasn't a cab driver. "Who are you?" I screamed, pounding on the plexiglass divider. "Let me out." "The boss wants a word," the mercenary said. A screen dropped down from the ceiling of the cab. One of those TV screens meant for advertisements. But instead of a commercial, a live video feed flickered to life. A man sat in a room that looked terrifyingly similar to Sonk's office, but darker. He was older with silver hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. I recognized him from the news dossier I had seen on SEU's desk. Park Ji-hun, the traitor, the man who had ordered the hit 6 months ago. "Miss Underwood." The man on the screen purred. "A pleasure to finally meet the woman who performed the miracle. What do you want?" I demanded, looking around for a weapon for anything. "I wanted confirmation," Park said, leaning back in his chair. "We suspected Wong was faking. We suspected he was healing, but we couldn't prove it until today." He chuckled, a dry rattling sound. "We watched the estate. We saw him let you go. The Wolf King never lets go of what is his. The fact that he let you leave means he grew a conscience. And a conscience makes a man weak. He's going to kill you." I spat at the screen. "He walks. He fights. He's coming for you." "I know," Park smiled. "That is why I have you." The king threw away his queen. "How careless." A harsh hissing sound filled the cab. I looked down. White gas was venting from the vents under the seats. I held my breath, scrambling backward, pressing my face into the leather seat, trying to filter the air through my jacket. But the gas was heavy, sweet-smelling, and instantaneous. My vision blurred. The screen wavered. "Don't worry," Park's voice floated through the haze, sounding miles away. "You are the invitation to the funeral." My limbs turned to lead. The panic in my chest slowed to a dull thud. The last thing I saw was the gray sky of souls spinning out of control. And the last thing I thought of was SQ standing in the doorway, begging me to stay. "You were right," I thought as the darkness took me. I wasn't safe. Then nothing. The warehouse smelled of brine, rust, and old blood. It was a cavernous cathedral of decaying industry on the edge of the Incheon docks, where the wind whistled through holes in the corrugated steel roof like a dying breath. I came to with a gasp, the chemical taste of the sedative still coating my tongue. My wrists were zip-tied to the back of a heavy metal chair. My ankles were bound to the legs. "Ah, Sleeping Beauty returns." A voice echoed. Park Ji-hun stood in front of me, flanked by 10 men. They were heavily armed, submachine guns, tactical vests, the works. Park looked immaculate in a white suit that seemed impossibly bright against the grime of the shipyard. "He's here," Park smiled, checking his watch. "Right on time." The massive sliding doors of the warehouse groaned open. The afternoon light spilled in, blindingly bright, cutting a rectangular path through the gloom. A silhouette appeared in the opening. It wasn't a tactical team. It wasn't a tank. It was a wheelchair. Huang Q rolled into the warehouse alone. He was wearing a simple black suit, his hands resting on his lap. He looked small in the vast space. Defeated. He stopped the chair in the center of the killbox, surrounded by 10 guns pointing at his head. "Look at him." Park laughed, the sound bouncing off the steel beams. The dragon of soul crawling on wheels to beg for his Sheniqua didn't look at Park. He looked at me. His face was bruised from where he must have fought his own security to get out. Or maybe from the sheer exhaustion of the chase, but his eyes were clear. They locked onto mine, conveying a silent message I couldn't decode. "Let her go, Jihan," Sheniqua said. His voice was calm, eerily so. "This is between us." "It ends when you sign," Park said, snapping his fingers. A goon stepped forward, shoving a tablet into Sheniqua's hands. "The transfer of assets, every holding company, every account. Sign it, and I might let you bleed out quickly instead of slowly." Sheniqua took the tablet. He looked down at the glowing screen. "You think I am weak?" Sheniqua said softly. "I think you are broken." Park sneered. "I think you are a who lost his throne." Sheniqua looked up. He stared directly at Park, then shifted his gaze to me. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "I told you, Sheniqua," he said, his voice carrying through the silence. "I told you I would burn the world." He dropped the tablet. It hit the concrete floor with a loud clack. And then he stood up. The movement was so sudden, so impossible in the eyes of his enemies that for a split second, no one moved. The collective brain of the room stuttered. They were watching a paralyzed man rise like a revenant from the grave. Sheniqua didn't just stand. He exploded. He grabbed the gun barrel of the goon standing closest to him. With a savage twist of his hips that generated massive torque, he snapped the man's wrist, spun him around, and used him as a human shield. Burt Park's men opened fire. Bullets tore into the human shield, shredding the goon. Sheniqua shoved the dead body forward and drew 2 pistols from the back of his waistband. The dragon was loose. He moved with a terrifying fluid grace. He didn't shuffle. He sprinted. He dove into a roll, coming up on one knee to fire 2 precise shots into the chests of the men on the left. Bang. Bang. 2 bodies hit the floor. A thug charged him with a machete, thinking he could overpower him in melee. Sheniqua didn't retreat. He stepped into the swing. He caught the man's arm, but it was his legs that did the work. He delivered a brutal bone-shattering roundhouse kick to the man's head. The sound of the impact was like a gunshot. The thug folded instantly, unconscious before he hit the ground. "He can walk." Someone screamed in terror. "He can walk. Kill him." Park shrieked, scrambling backward toward the exit, his composure shattered. The warehouse became a blur of muzzle flashes and violence. I yanked at my bonds, screaming in frustration. I wasn't going to just watch. A gunman, backing away from Sheniqua's rampage, stumbled near me. He was distracted, trying to reload. I waited. I calculated. When he stepped within range, I threw my weight backward, tipping my heavy metal chair. I swung my bound legs up and kicked out with everything I had. My heels connected with the back of his knee. He buckled with a yelp, his gun clattering to the floor. "Sheniqua!" Sheniqua roared. He saw the opening. He didn't use a gun. He sprinted across the gap, jumped and drove his knee into the falling gunman's chest, crushing him into the concrete. He looked at me for a split second, a look of fierce pride before turning back to the fight. Only Park was left. The traitor was running for the side door, fumbling with the latch. Sheniqua raised his pistol. He didn't run. He walked. He walked with the slow, terrifying purpose of inevitable death. Park got the door open, but Sheniqua fired. 1 shot. It didn't kill him. It took out his right leg. Park screamed, collapsing onto the rusted grating. He dragged himself backward, looking up at the man towering over him. "Please," Park begged, holding up a shaking hand. "Sheniqua, brother, we can deal. Half the city. I'll give you half." Sheniqua stood over him. He wasn't out of breath. He looked like a statue of judgment carved from blood and shadow. "You called me a Sheniqua," said, his voice devoid of mercy. "I didn't know," Park stammered. "I thought you were grounded." Sheniqua raised the gun to Park's forehead. "You forgot one thing, Ji-Hune." Sheniqua whispered. "Dragons fly." Bang. The shot echoed. Final and absolute. Park Ji-Hun slumped back, his eyes staring blankly at the rusted ceiling. Silence rushed back into the warehouse, heavy and ringing. Sheniqua lowered the gun. He stood there for a moment, surrounded by bodies, his chest heaving slightly. Then he turned. He holstered the weapons and walked toward me. He was covered in blood, some his, mostly theirs. His suit was ruined, but he walked tall. He walked straight. He reached me and pulled a knife from his belt. With a quick gentle slice, the zip ties on my wrists fell away. Then my ankles. I tried to stand, but my legs were numb from the circulation being cut off. I stumbled forward. He caught me, but he didn't pull me up. He did something that stopped my heart. He sank to his knees. Hang, the man who had just slaughtered 10 men to prove he could stand, voluntarily lowered himself to the dirty concrete floor in front of me. He took my hands in his blood-stained ones. He looked up at me, his eyes searching my face, checking for bruises, for cuts, for fear. "I'm here," he rasped, his voice breaking. "I'm here, Sheniqua. I've got you." He rested his forehead against my knees, his shoulders shaking. It was a gesture of absolute submission, absolute devotion. "You came," I whispered, reaching down to touch his hair. "You walked into a trap." He looked up and the fire in his eyes was gone, replaced by a raw, naked vulnerability. "I would have crawled," he said fiercely. "If that's what it took to get to you, I would have crawled." I looked at the carnage around us, then down at the man kneeling at my feet. The lie was over. The war was won, and the king was finally truly mine. The cameras flashed like a localized lightning storm, blinding and relentless. But this time, I didn't flinch. 3 months had passed since the blood and fire of the shipyard. Tonight, the grand ballroom of the Hang Tower was packed with the elite of Seoul, politicians, table heirs, and the vultures who had circled us when they smelled blood. The double doors swung open. The room went silent. Hang walked in. He didn't roll. He walked. He wore a midnight blue tuxedo that fit him like armor, moving with the terrifying predatory grace of an apex predator reclaiming his territory. And I was on his arm. I wasn't wearing scrubs. I wasn't wearing a functional swimsuit. I was wearing a floor-length gown of liquid gold that clung to every curve. Shouting to the world that I wasn't hiding in the shadows anymore. "Look at him." The whispers rippled through the crowd like a wave. "It's a miracle. The American doctor. She performed a miracle." They thought I had fixed his nerves. They didn't know I had simply given him a reason to stand. We moved through the crowd, parting the sea of guests. A heavy-set man blocked our path. Director Choi, a rival who had tried to buy Sangus debt when he was crippled. "Mr. Huang." Choi smirked, his eyes sliding over me with oily condescension. "Remarkable recovery. And you kept your little nurse. How quaint. It's hard to find good help these days." Sang Q stiffened, his hand tightening on my waist. I covered his hand with mine, stopping him. I didn't need him to fight this battle. I stepped forward, towering over Choi in my heels. "You're mistaken, Director," I said, my voice smooth and cold as glass. "I'm not the help. I own 50% of the rehabilitation patent that just drove your stock price down 10 points this morning. If you speak to me again without an appointment, I'll buy your debt and evict you from your own home." Shu's face pale. He stuttered, bowed, and fled. Sang Hu leaned down, his breath hot against my ear. "Remind me never to cross you, Mrs. Hang." "Smart man," I smirked. We stepped out onto the balcony, leaving the noise of the party behind. The Seoul skyline glittered before us, a sprawling ocean of light. It was the same view as the day I arrived, but everything had changed. He moved behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist, pulling my back flush against his chest. I could feel the solid, unwavering strength of his legs supporting us both. "They think you saved me," he murmured, kissing the curve of my neck. "I did save you," I whispered, leaning back into him. "I saved you from becoming the monster you were pretending to be." He turned me around, his dark eyes locking onto mine. There was no more deception, no more masks, just the raw, intense heat of the man who had burned the world down to keep me. "Phase 1, he said softly, quoting my own initial assessment back to me. "You said my legs felt like a sleeping tiger, waiting to snap its jaws." I smiled, running my hand down the lapel of his jacket, feeling the heavy beat of his heart underneath. "I was right," I said, pulling him down for a kiss. "And the tiger isn't sleeping anymore." Oh my God. Can someone fall in love with a character? I think I just did. I haven't gotten excited about a story in a long time. This was lovely and utterly funny. It brought out my dark sense of humor like nothing else in a long time. Thank you for this. Seriously, you made my week. I'll be thinking about this story and this character for a long time.